This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Phyllis Earles for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 1:53 p.m. on December 10th, 2025. This interview is being recorded at the library at Prairieview A&M University in Prairieview, Texas. All right, how are you doing today, Miss Earles?
I'm doing great, and you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for taking the time today to talk with me.
You're welcome.
I want to start here. Just pronounce your full name for the historical record, and then tell me what your relationship is to the radio station KPVU.
My full name is Phyllis Lynn Earles, and my relationship with the radio station, I am a listener, but being in my position, I have a different viewpoint maybe because of preservation of the radio recordings.
And what is your position here at the university?
University Archivist, Head of Special Collections Archives Department at the John B. Coleman Library, Prairieview, Texas.
Beautiful. And we'll get there to your professional experiences here at Prairieview A&M University. But first, I just want to take it back a little bit and ask you, where does Phyllis Earles come from?
Long or short version?
We got a little bit of time.
Okay. I'm the middle child and the only girl of the union of Marcus Leo Earles Sr. and Hazel Elizabeth Tippett Earles. I was born in Ruston, Louisiana, but grew up in Grambling, Louisiana. Both my parents met at Grambling, and they retired from Grambling. I'm a Grambling State University graduate class of 1978. My major is art education, minor and master's in library science. I wanted to be a graphic designer, but of course, back in the day, graphic designers didn't have what you would consider a solid career option. So my parents encouraged me to be an art teacher. But when I did my practicum, I knew it was not my calling. And one of the things I would say at Grambling State is communities similar to Prairieview, where there's a small black community. Everyone knew everybody, and it was a village type of setup. And one of the things that I loved about living in Grambling was the fact where we lived, we were the first family on the block. We were in suburbia before it was labeled suburbia. About an acre of land. My dad is from South Louisiana. Matter of fact, St. Francisville, that's where he was born. And his family moved to Scotlandville, which is the black section of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He's finished from Southern University from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my mother finished from Tennessee State in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Where was your mom's family from?
Knoxville, Tennessee, but they call Watertown, which was the black section of Knoxville, Tennessee.
Are you comfortable sharing when you were born? The birth date?
Yes and no.
Just to give me a sense of the history so I can contextualize.
I was born in the late 50s, 1957.
Okay. And you said you graduated in... Was it 78?
78, December 78 from Grambling State University.
Okay. What did your folks do for work?
My dad started off at the farm at Grambling State, and when they closed the farm, somehow he moved to the field of economics, and he retired from there as interim head of the economics department. My mother was a stenographer, so she worked in the Graphic Arts Center where they did mass copying for departments across campus. My mother was also a beautician. So at the house, my dad set up a room for her to do hair when she got off of work. So it was an unusual life, but I would say I was very blessed to be raised by my parents from two different parts of the country, but because my father was born 1917, mom was born 1925, so both of them grew up in the Depression era. So I was able to partake of a lot of their wisdom as a child, and it has carried me thus far.
Yeah, what kind of stories would they share about that time growing up through the Depression?
I don't remember a lot of specifics, but I would say it was hard. I remember because my mother lived in Tennessee, we didn't visit her side of the family that often because being in Louisiana, that was a long trip. But we saw my father's mother, who lived in Scotlandville, quite frequent. I remember a wooden house on cinder blocks, and it was a small house. She did have indoor plumbing, but there was an outhouse that we used when I was a child, and eventually a bathroom was added to the house. Since I'm the middle girl, 2 years younger than my older brother, which is Marcus Jr., anything Big Brother did, I wanted to do. So I learned how to fish. I learned how to shoot a shotgun and rifle. My father always had a garden, so we ate off the land what we could grow. And so those skills came in handy over 30 years later when I got a chance to stay in Africa for a few years.
Oh, wow. Were you a college student at that time?
No, I was actually a staff member here at Prairieview. At the time, Dr. Flossie Bird was the senior vice president provost. For some reason, she had a liking toward me, and she granted me each year an option to take leave of absence, which was unusual. And so in the third year, I had an option to either come back to Prairieview or stay in Africa. So I decided to come back to stateside.
Now, growing up in Grambling, paint a picture for me of what the community was like. And you can include sort of civic institutions or the church or places where you like to have fun as a child. Paint us a fuller picture of what Grambling was like in your youth.
I can remember some photographs where we had pictures where we had our birthday parties, and most of the time, it was in the kitchen where you had the punch and the cake, and then we would go outside and play in the backyard, the swings. And, when we were growing up, we didn't have computers. Close we had to a computer was a manual typewriter, and there was no calculator. So everything was done using, I would say, old school way, reading, writing, arithmetic. Because I was a tomboy, because I was a daddy's girl, anything Dad did, I followed Dad until my mother figured out I was trying to get out of household chores. So I would prefer to work outdoors than inside. My mother also, as you say, grew up in the Depression era. So a lot of things that we can afford now, they couldn't afford it. So they make do. They always said necessity is the mother of invention. And so canning, preserving, make your own preserves, slaughter the animals, growing your own food. Grocery stores were limited, and during that particular time, segregation. And it was part of a life where I would say the strength came from, because without struggle, you know how strong you are. And at this day and era, we having some challenges as well. It might look different, but the undercurrent is still the same. And one of the things my father always taught me, stand for what is right no matter what, even if you're standing alone, right always wins in the end. And so that's the mantra that I live by. And being at Prairieview, it's like a second home for me because it's similar to where I grew up in Grambling. Everyone knew everybody. If you needed some sugar or an egg, go see the next door neighbor, across the street neighbor like Miss Henry. Everybody cooked from scratch. We didn't have hamburger helper when I was growing up. That came later. There wasn't any, because money was tight and you made do or did without. And one of the advantages of growing up in that time period, you learn critical thinking skills. My dad would always say, hey, Dad, how to spell such and such? Go look in the dictionary. Well, how do you know how to look it up if you don't know how to spell it? So it made you think on your own, which was, to me, was a skill set that I would say was vital to where I am today. And I would say, because I was the only girl, I learned what you call the traditional female roles, cooking, cleaning, learned how to sew. We had home economics classes. It was mandatory for the girls. And the boys, at some point, they did maybe 1 or 2 classes of home ec. But I would say the foundational way of living, which is something Prairieview used to do as well, vocational education. As I mentioned before, my mother was a beautician. People would say cosmetologist at the time. But I found it very, I don't know how to explain it. It's a foundation where you had something you can have as a backup if you wanted to do hair. Well, say my mother did hair on the side.
Entrepreneurial.
Yeah, entrepreneurial skills. Yes, that's correct. And if you needed to mend some clothes, you knew how to do it. If you had a sewing machine, you knew how to do it by hand. People didn't throw away anything. And so now we have climate issues. They didn't have plastic, wasn't as prominent as it is now. Glass was used for preserving. You don't preserve anything in plastic like we did and it's safer for us, according to what science says. It's safer to use glass versus plastic.
What institutions were your parents a part of? Did they participate civically? Were they members of a church?
Yes, my mother was raised as a Methodist, and my dad was raised as Baptist. My dad believed in family, pray together, stay together. So my mother eventually moved to the Baptist church, which was New Rocky Valley Baptist Church in Grambling. Both of my brothers and myself were Christian in the Methodist church by Dr. Theodore, I can see his face, but I can't think of his name. Matter of fact, he also married my parents at his home. I wish I could remember his name, but right now it escapes me.
That's okay. If it comes back, just let me know.
Okay.
And, what issues mattered most in your family? Like whether a social issue, political issue, economics, what was most important? What was pressing?
Do what is right no matter what. Always remember the golden rule. Treat people how you would like to be treated. Do an honest day's job. Your work represents you. My dad would always say, start off how you plan on ending up. And a lot of that wisdom I impart with the students at Prairieview, people I meet. I think it's important that with each generation, if you can help somebody, help them if they're doing something positive. And it might take a little bit longer to do your work, but you are, I would say, casting seeds where hopefully that soil will multiply. And everyone needs a listening ear at some point in time, no matter who you are. And I think with COVID and over time, we might be more social interacted through social media, but we have lost the human connection. And I think that's one of the things that I miss the most about my upbringing. If you did something wrong, it would meet you at the house before you even got home. When I was in college, the same thing. Everybody knew everybody, so if you were slacking in class, my parents would know. And so it made you more conscious of, I guess to say, weighing the pros and cons of what you should do if you decide to entertain something you know you're not supposed to.
Now, you were young, but you grew up in a time of immense change. The civil rights movement essentially plays out as you are growing up, coming of age, and moving through school. What do you remember about that time? And I'm curious how you would characterize that time before de jure segregation is legally ended, and how it felt after that? What had changed, if anything?
All right, this moment I remember seeing on TV were the riots. People were burning buildings and being destructive when Martin Luther King was killed.
So 1968 kind of stands out first.
When Robert Kennedy was assassinated. No, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, I'm sorry. I remember my parents would take us when we were growing up to culture centers, museums, libraries. They want us to be well-rounded. Matter of fact, my mother was insistent on all the children learn how to play the piano. So my mother and dad bought us a piano. Big brother was doing it, so I did. He stopped and I continued. I think I started in the second grade and ended in my 10th grade in high school. I do miss playing the piano. If I had a piano at the house, I would love to use that, because to me that was one way of, I wouldn't say therapy, but it was an outlet that was soothing to the spirit.
Gave you joy.
Yes, it did. It was soothing as well. And it also was an opportunity to gain some experience in what it would feel like to, as I say, tickle the ivories. I remember my parents would have the 78 LPs and the 33 and the third and the 45s. Matter of fact, I still have all of them.
What kind of music was playing?
Jazz, mostly. Diane Washington, Dionne Warwick, Ramsey Lewis. One thing I do remember distinctly was Wes Montgomery, who was an acoustic guitar player. He was in Shreveport, went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and it was. I still remember it. And neither of my parents were musical, maybe because they grew up in the era they couldn't afford even a used instrument, but they want us to be culturally rounded. And one of the things at Grambling, they had lyceum programs where you had opera performances, ballet, along with the contemporary music of the time. And I would say I'm glad I was born in the time that I was born. I have no regrets. You can compare it to what's going on now, but I believe the foundation that my parents gave me has helped me to be where I am today. You mentioned about the environment that we're in now. There's still some issues. We all know it. And however you want to label it, it's an issue how you treat a human being. All of us have eyes and a nose, legs and arms. No matter what color you are or where you're from, you're still a human being. But I also know that even though people might not view their viewpoint as something they don't consider positive or as to the human experience, it's not for me to judge, but to pray for them and to have the strength to know that it's just like, for instance, how would a baby know what skin color they are unless someone who's older than them say, you're different from that person? I remember actually, Dad had a VW Beetle, 1971. We went to Bossier City to a McDonald's. My younger brother and my older brother and I were in the car, and this white family pulled up, and they start calling us nigger. And they say you're not supposed to use the word, but that's what they use. And I remember having a conversation with my parents, and just like a child, we are taught how to be biased or have prejudice. We all have some to some degree, whether we want to admit it or not, because of our experiences. But it's still, you're a human being. Some people treat their pets better than they treat a human being. Animals give you love back, generally unconditional, but we have a choice. Animals go with instinct. And to me, I grew up where we had cats and dogs because where we live, it was a wooded area. So the animals had their purpose. They stayed outside to some degree, but the cat was there for the snakes and the rodents, and the dogs helped to guard the house. And I remember a calico cat moved in when I was born at the homestead, and I remember seeing the kittens being born. I remember when my dad went to the farm to have a calf, help with a calf to be born. It was stillborn. It really changed my perspective what you would consider life and death, because the calf was born. It was stillborn. Go ahead.
So getting back to that moment where you experienced that N-word directed at your family, it was kind of a conversation that you would have with your parents after the fact and say, we're going to kind of address this, hold their heads up high, and kind of sort of demonstrate a better moral path. Is that kind of the response?
Yeah, it is when you want to, I would say, lash out because someone has made their presence known in a negative way, doesn't really do any good. And it takes some constraints. And being a black female, the viewpoint would be different than a black male.
Yeah, how is it different?
How is it different? Because a female, we're labeled as the weaker physical sex. And so there are things that could happen to a female, but it can happen to a male as well. But one of the things that slavery did, it separated the families in the black community. And so a lot of things, we're stronger in some ways in regards to what we were taught. But also I wonder over time, has what the previous generation was taught, has it been watered down? Because I want my children to have more than I did, is what people would say. I don't have any children. But I always wondered if I had children, they were away at college, what would their professor or their supervisor do to help them grow as a person? I believe that if a student is working or volunteer in our department, that they should grow as a person. They should see progressive growth every semester. And I believe in asking questions. What did you learn? How did you feel when you learned this? Just like the history for Prairieview, we have some unexpected students that came in yesterday. It was after 5, and I left the door unlocked. And when I went back into the offices, I was startled. There was 2 young ladies there. I said, "How can I help you?" "Oh, we're just looking around." I said, "The office is closed, the lights are off." And I said, "How can I help you?" Well, long story short, we had a history lesson. I asked them some questions, so I took the opportunity to impart some knowledge on in their minds, in the sense that they were juniors. They didn't know it was the 5th floor. I said, "You didn't know?" "Well, we just come to look around." And this is the time of semester a lot of students come and look around. One was a nursing major. One was a marketing major, I believe. So I showed them how to use the Digital Commons, which is an online repository, and I asked them some questions. I have some photos in my office where I used those to spur conversation, to test people's knowledge, but also I called anyone who comes to the archive and I get a chance to talk to them and give them some historical facts. I always say, anytime you're away out in the public and you might have a PV shirt on or whatever, you have an opportunity to impart some positive knowledge. We always hear negative about some institutions or some people, but there's something positive from every culture. And so I said, I dub you archive ambassadors. So when they left, they had I said, greater respect for this institution. And any institution, but particularly for HBCUs, it's important that if you don't tell your story, who's going to tell it? No one can tell it like you. Like you're interviewing me. How can you tell my story? Because you're not me, I'm not you. And so having respect for someone's opinion and viewpoint, to me, is part of the human experience that we've lost. Or we're losing, so to speak.
So nurturing curiosity, taking ownership around identity, and is part of helping people achieve their full humanity. And it sounds like you were also describing struggle itself as being something that helps build character and build a sense of
That's true.
a sense of self, and that might be something that you're identifying as being a little bit lost today. Does that sound accurate?
I wouldn't say loss is a powerful word, even though it's a short word. How will you know if you're lost would be the question. Is any experience that you have, how can you say it didn't change you? Was it positive, negative? It can change you, but at the time it happened, how do you process it? It's very important, being self-aware. What is your base for nurturing? Is it a friend? Is it a family member? Is it a co-worker? Who's in your life has a positive influence, makes a big difference on how you view life and your experiences.
Can you describe a moment here as the archivist at Prairieview where a student came into your door and you're like, oh, Lord, I have some work to do here to kind of help, to educate, to drive their curiosity, etc. And when they finished their time in the program here, maybe they were history majors, maybe not, but you saw that evolution and that growth over time.
It's going to be hard to pick up a situation, but I would say yesterday, which was December the 9th, one of the students, her name is Natalie, I can't think of her last name. She interviewed me for a podcast for a digital storytelling class from Dr. Pingram out of history department. She was one of 3 or 4 other students who interviewed me. Dr. Pingram said, you need to go see Miss Earles. She's awesome. And so yesterday she stopped by to give me a token of thank you. And we spent about 20 minutes, and she just wanted to say, Miss Earles, I really appreciate you. And how you didn't know that day how much you had an impact on me. And she's a cosmetologist, and I said, did you know cosmetology was one of the courses they had at Cosmetology Institute? She said, no. She's general studies major, I think African American Studies is her minor, and she's interested in possibly a master's in library science. And so I said, well, come back. She said, I will be coming back. And she's one of those students, and I said, that's why I'm still here, because the potential is there, and you never know when you might have a positive effect on someone. It might take some time out of your day, but why are we here? We're here for the students. If we don't have the students, you wouldn't have a job. If you don't have another generation coming in, will you be able to teach them, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom? Learning service opportunities is always available, but how do you frame it? I would like to give a shout out to Tracy Moore, who's a PB grad, class of 1998. She's interim art department, art program director. And we've had some conversation how art can really tell a story. And she shared with me her history box project in her digital media class. And it's a box that a student would create with artifacts of a person, place, or thing, and some are related to the university's history. And then there's another professor in the history department, Dr. Marco Robinson, who I've worked with on multiple grants. We got a chance. He invited me to go to Slave Cemetery in Brazoria County, and I met Dr. Molly Morgan from Rice University. She said she met me previously, and we connected, and she came to a campus with some of her graduate students in archaeology, doing some research in our corporate extension records. And so I can give you plenty of instances where you didn't know what impact you would have on someone until someone lets you know. So when I have those days of why am I still here, I remember those days. I have symbols of love and care from some of the students, some staff, just to remind me, and to, whenever they come in my office, to let them know I still remember your gesture of gratitude. And that's another thing I think we have forgotten in society. Some cultures still have it, but in America, some traditional hospitable ways of treating people, increase of road rage and how people won't open the door when somebody's coming behind them in the store or whatever. I mean, we call it common courtesy when I was growing up. And to me, it's important to remember, again, everybody's a human being.
Yeah. Let's go back to that era of common courtesy. Your time attending Grambling State University as a college student. What went into that decision to stay close to home? And tell me how that HBCU, Grambling, changed your life at that time.
Well, my parents said, if you don't have a scholarship, guess where you're going? So I went to Grambling State. As an art major, I remember Dr. Thomas Richardson was head of the art department. I was very interested in art history. You take your basic classes. I remember I was hoping I think it might have been my junior year. They had bought some jewelry making equipment, and I was hoping to take a jewelry making class, but somebody decided to lift unlawfully the equipment from the university, so I never got a chance to do the jewelry making class. And going back to Africa, I got a chance to work with the raw materials. Growing up, I don't know if people remember the hand crank ice cream machine where you use rock salt. I can actually draw the interior and exterior to a gentleman whose name was Bachu. He was a well-known mechanic in Kampala, Uganda, where I was there for 3 years. And he just brushed me aside. When I was there in 91 to 94, there still was this mindset of double standards with women. And so because I was a woman, certain things they just ignored. And I remember teaching the housekeeper how to make sausage. The hand crank grinder you were attached to the top of a counter, and you put in your chunks of meat and you make your own sausage. As I mentioned, my dad was in ag, and Lindsay Witherspoon was taught some of the animal science classes, and he was over the meat lab. He actually gave me his sausage recipe, but of course it was for 100 servings. But I was very honored that he gave me the recipe, and I tweaked it. And I actually went back to Uganda and started making crayfish sausage, fish sausage. The life in Kampala, Uganda was so black and white compared to what we have in the U.S. It's unbelievable. And so my upbringing helped me to acclimate to living overseas for several years.
Now, when you were a college student at Grambling, they had a radio station. They still have a radio station, KGRM.
That is correct.
Did you happen to listen to that station? What do you remember about it?
Matter of fact, I still do when I go home. 91.5. I remember a guy by the name of Moore. I can see his face. I can't remember his first name. Dr. Allen Williams was over the radio station, I believe at that time when I was in college. It was in Dunbar Hall where the fine arts was. They had a theater, small theater there, the radio station, the art department. It was across the quad from T.H. Harris Auditorium. The campus was in the city, just like Prairieview. The town I always call it a town, even though it's a city. It's focused. The livelihood was mostly focused around the people who worked on campus. KGRM is still alive and well. Matter of fact, during that conference, I got a chance to have a breakout session with one of the guys who's at the radio station.
Charleston.
Yes, and I got a chance to talk to him. I said, "Do you know so and so?" He's like, "Yeah." So it was so nice to know that someone I knew, he knew, and I'm a little bit older than him, but it was nice to make that connection.
What was homecoming like at your HBCU?
Similar to Prairieview. Back in the day, they did the homecoming parade the morning of the game. I think on that Friday, what we call a funeral, where you would do a mock funeral of your competitor. That stopped. I can't remember when, but when I was in college, they had it going. But I know at Prairieview they stopped after a while. They had a bonfire. Of course, the cheerleaders and the band, and they had step shows with the Greek fraternities and sororities. So, like you say, it's homecoming.
Did you pledge to a sorority?
Yes, I did pledge in spring 1977, Delta Sigma Theta.
And do you get back for homecomings to this day? How often would you go back over the course of your life?
I met my best friend pledging, and she was a party girl, and I was homebound. I'm an introvert by nature. And so she was the one who helped me break out of my shell to a point. Unfortunately, she passed away unexpectedly a little bit over 32 years ago, and homecoming was never the same.
Sorry.
No, thank you. But I can remember the good times. Her mother was my second mother, and her mother, best friend, is my third mother, who's still alive. I think she'll be 91 this June. She lives in Shreveport. Her name is Eartha Gibbs. She was one of my dad's students. And I would say pledging taught me a lot. I remember my father telling me pledging is a mind game. It'll teach you how to think as one. And I found it very interesting not having a sister. I had 21 sisters. My ideal of having sisterhood was because I didn't have sisters, and I was an introvert, that I would develop friendship over time. But one of the things that came out of that, being on the line at Grambling, our line name was Utopia. 5 of us moved to Houston, and one of the line sisters, Rita Kelly, decided to get the 5 of us together every January. We would go out and eat and catch up. Well, Rita and I developed a connection on a spiritual level. Both of us are Christians, and we believe in God, and we just connected. And I had Thanksgiving dinner with her and her family, and everybody brought a dish or two, and I say break bread and have friends, laughter, good music, good conversation. You can always make a friend and then increase your bond with those who you know.
What was your time like in Houston? What did you make of the city? It's a big difference from Grambling.
To say the least, when I first came here, there was no 290. There was 2 lanes at Old Hempstead Highway. It took a lot longer to get to Houston. When I got my job, I moved here in December 78 to get situated. I stayed on campus.
Here at Prairieview?
Yeah, L.O. Evans, which is now where they have the William Holland Gaines Park. And that's where I stayed for 2.5 years in one little room. And it was, I think it was two stories. And it was for faculty and staff. And I miss it in some ways because all I had to do was walk down the sidewalk and I was at the library. When I first started here, I worked at the W.R. Banks Library in the basement acquisitions department.
So you didn't actually move into Houston City. You actually
stayed on campus.
In a way, you were kind of going from what was a big town to an even more rural environment, in a sense, outside of
Yes, it was.
Prairieview.
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of the opposite of what I was thinking. Okay, describe that first position here at Prairieview and take me on a little journey in your employment history here at the university.
Remember the girlfriend I said was a party girl? Her name was LaWanda Boogery. And for years, my parents would always bring us to the Space City Classic, which was a football game between Grambling and Texas Southern. And we would always stay near the Astrodome. So my mother asked her, hey, who do you want to go with us? And I said, LaWanda. So she wanted to go to a party that I did not want to go to at the Holiday Inn Astrodome. And she convinced me to go. I think it was the band had a party. And, of course, it was everybody from Grambling stayed at the Astrodome Holiday Inn. And lo and behold, waiting for the elevator, there was this man by the name of Frank Francis, who I remember I hadn't seen in years. He graduated from Grambling, one of my dad's former students. He recognized me. He's like, Miss Earles, like, Mr. Francis. Conversation ensued. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. I applied for the job and got it. And I was hired as assistant acquisitions librarian. As I said, I worked in the basement, and we did everything manual. There was no computers. Acquisition department, you ordered supplies, books, and so forth for the library. And that was my first job. On the weekend, when they were short of workers for the circulation department, I would work there. So I worked in 2 different departments.
Did you have a preference?
Technical service, which was acquisitions. I loved being with the books, seeing what was new that came in. We used to call it the dead in the live file, where the live file meant it was on order. The dead file means we were sending it to cataloging to be cataloged so it could be put on the shelf to be checked out or used. So I got a chance to see all the books that came in. So that was fun. Fast forward, my dad encouraged me for 2.5 years, get your master's before you get married. Get your master's before you get married. So I got a chance to go to the University of Michigan Ann Arbor campus in 1981 to 82, got my master's on a minority fellowship. And came back to Prairieview, worked in the periodical microforms department, not knowing that I was going to be transferred. I thought I was going to go back to acquisition. Well, the head of the department at the time was Alma Dawson, who was leaving. So I had a crash course to manage people who were twice as old as I was, which was interesting, a position to be in. And then I was moved to the reference department. I was there for 12 years. And then when I moved to reference, we were still in W.R. Banks Library. And then during that time, back when I went to grad school, A.I. Thomas was the president. Percy Pierre became the president after that. And that's where he decided we needed a library. So we're in the John B. Comey Library. We moved in the fall of 1988. We broke ground in 86.
Thank you. Let's back up a little bit, because you just mentioned you went to Michigan, University of Michigan, for your master's. So very different place. It's in the north. It's cold, very different from Texas and Louisiana. And a PWI, right? You had attended Grambling. You've worked at Prairieview and University. What did you see that was different attending for your master's program at the University of Michigan? And maybe tell us what makes HBCU special in comparison.
That's a loaded question. When my father encouraged me to apply to 5 schools. Clark Atlanta, which is, of course, is an HBCU. LSU, Baton Rouge, University of Michigan, Texas Women, Denton, and University of North Texas. Well, University of Michigan was the last to respond, but they gave me the best financial package. And my dad said, pros and cons going to a PWI for your master's, pros and cons for staying at HBCU. One was the pros was to see how others educate themselves. And it was an eye-opener to the world where there was plenty compared to what I was used to. I think at the time it was 40,000 students, which was shocking for me. At a little HBCU, to me, you get lost in the shuffle because of the numbers. The quality of education is great. The exposure that you have is great. But I say what sets apart at an HBCU, you're not a number. When I went to Grambling, people would remember you. How are you doing? You okay today? I mean, when I was at Michigan, speak to people, even my own people, they were reluctant. And I found more interaction with my people, those in graduate school, than undergrad. I don't know why, but that's the way it was. I stayed on the North Campus at University of Michigan, and it was co-ed living. So my first quarter, I didn't have a roommate, which was great. Then the second quarter, I had a lady by the name of Theodora. She was from Greece. I think she was civil engineering major, chain cigarette smoker, which was a challenge for me. But she was the sweetest thing. And I met some other ladies. Terry and Rita were from Richmond, Virginia, and Angela, I can't think of her last name. She was from Gary, Indiana, where we developed a bond because there was a small Black community of library science majors. I remember a young man by the name of D. He was from Michigan. I don't think he finished his master's. I think he dropped out. Going to a PWI, we had multiple libraries, and we only had one. Having the resources, it was just a culture shock. My dad told me, but it wasn't the same as being there. When he got his master's at the University of Illinois in the 60s, he told me what I would experience. You more than likely be the only Black in the class, and that was true. It was a challenging time because I was so used to being around my people. But one of the things, as I say, challenges help you to grow. It's up to you. It can either make you or break you. And coming back to Prairieview after getting my master's degree, again, it opened up another window. And when I eventually got to Africa, that was another window that was open. always wanted to go to the motherland, but never knew how I would get there. And so I always say all those experiences growing up, what I've already shared thus far, is still something that's a foundational base for me to know that I've made it thus far in spite of I'm still here.
Yeah, thank you. And how have those experiences, attending University of Michigan, traveling and visiting Africa and spending years there, what I want to ask is, how does it change how you relate to the students here on campus at Prairieview? Maybe it's in terms of setting a vision or helping them to imagine what could be.
I remember when I first came back, I came back to the reference department, and I was telling them, you have to go to Africa, but do not go to where there's commercialized. Go where the people, the locals, go, for you to get a true sense of the culture, because there's this propaganda that every country puts out, but people that I interacted who were local thought there were no homeless people. Yes, we have homeless people. They were thirsty for knowledge. During that time, the culture was they paid for the boys to go to school first. If they could afford, then the girls would go. They still had dowries for their daughters when they had marriage, so they had multiple marriage. If you could afford it, you had as many wives as you wanted. I met a couple, a family, Donald and Beverly Petting, who had been in Africa for about 20 years. I got a chance, and this might sound strange, I love to cook from scratch. I made my first croissants in Africa. At the high altitude, I thought it would make a difference, but I got cookbooks that I took to, help me with that. And because my dad was an ag, he taught me how to make ice cream. However you pasteurize the milk, I knew how to do that. Dad would kill the chicken. He would hand it to me to put it on the table. So I know how to pluck a chicken, shuck corn, shell peas. I know how to fish. I can bait a hook.
And these skills came in handy.
It came in handy, and I was a Girl Scout. So pair that with being a daddy's girl and a tomboy, not knowing it would come in handy years later. Matter of fact, one of the things that I miss about Africa is food was real. Now we have bioengineered, GMO food, which is not healthy. So Mother Nature has all the ingredients that we need, and America is one of the sickest countries in the world.
Yeah.
But living off the land made a big difference where you rotate the crop, so you wouldn't deplete the nutrients, because each crop has its own needs. So you nurtured the land, and the land gave back to you.
And this was in Uganda?
Yes, but I grew up with a garden when I was a child. So until my father wasn't able to maintain the garden, we always had a garden. We had chickens, we had ducks. I'm a strawberry girl. That's my favorite fruit. And Dad always made sure he had at least one row of strawberries for his daughter. His one daughter, he would call me. And we had peach trees and plum trees as well. So we ate off the land, a mulberry tree too.
Was there a moment where you were like, okay, I could just stay here in Uganda and be good? Or were you happy to get back home?
That's a loaded question. I would say, because I knew I wouldn't be there forever, I made sure I didn't get too comfortable with the amenities such as a cook, a housekeeper, a driver. We had guards, 24/7 machine guns. That's one thing that was very unsettling when you had to go. We travel, police checkpoints.
They had undergone a military dictatorship at that time, or that preceded?
When we got there, Idi Amin had already been expelled from Uganda, overthrown by Museveni. Matter of fact, got a chance to meet him in person. We lived in a rural area called Kabale, Uganda, which was in the southwest tip of Uganda, which was near the Rwanda border. So we were actually there when they had the Rwanda genocide, which was an experience in itself.
Yeah, what do you remember about that time?
Well, my former husband was a Vietnam vet, so if he got nervous, I would get nervous. When he was fine, I was fine. I remember seeing the bombs going off in the air, and I had a lung infection from it. The company that my husband worked for was agribusiness, and we had a contract a local doctor. One of the things that really bothered me was people could not afford shoes. And living in a rural area, your feet were your shoes. I remember there were people who had been walking for miles to get to the doctor, and the doctor would take me first. I said, no, they were here first. He said, no, you come first. It's like, why? They were here before me. That's the way I was taught.
It's just a class thing?
It was, yeah. But I had money.
Right.
I remember they couldn't afford an aspirin. That was 10 cents. So one of the things that was a wake-up call, like, you're more blessed than you think you are. Mm-hmm. In America, we have a lot of things we take for granted, just like turning on the lights. We never knew when the electricity would go out. Having a level of purified, healthy drinking water. When we first got there, we lived in a hotel for a month until we moved into a house. And I washed the clothes by hand. We didn't have a washing machine. You didn't have a dryer. You put it out on the clothesline. I grew up where we had a washing machine, but we didn't have a dryer at the time. We put it out on the line that Dad created. Mm. And so we dried our clothes naturally.
And how were you received as a Black American woman in Africa?
Well, my former husband was lighter than me, and he had thick curly hairs, and they thought we were white because of our complexion. My hair was a lot longer then and thicker than it is now. Of course, there was no gray at the time. There was, again, propaganda. How do you know what is actually true? And with AI now, there's even more of a question that I have, what is actually true? Information that is able to be created and what you see. I remember a young man by the name of Anthony ended up being our gardener. And when, before we moved into our house, we stayed at the White Horse Inn on the hillside. And at the time, I had IBS, and I decided to leave my purse in the hotel room. And someone decided to break into the hotel room, and they stole the purse. They thought we had the company, the payroll. Mm. And fortunately, there were top brass from the Ugandan army staying at the same hotel, where in their culture, they lost face. And so word got out, and they called one of the guys. It was two guys and a lady. And they called us to the police station, and they interrogated him in their local language, which was the Bachiga language. Of course, I couldn't understand all what they were saying, but they were beating the gentleman with a metal bar on the bottom of his feet. Well, I couldn't stay, so my husband was a Vietnam vet, so I got to go. And so the way he was treated, even though it was illegal what he did, it had to be an inside job. It was an eye-opener on what we take for granted of how people are treated, even if you are guilty, and how things are changing where you're guilty without even knowing that you're really guilty. They haven't proven it yet, and how things are now in 2025, even before 2025, depends on where you're living and what you have. Because you have money doesn't mean people should still treat you with respect because of the color of your skin. Because you're female, that doesn't mean now that I have more I'll call platinum than I have black hair. People say madam. At first it bothered me, but now I consider a badge of honor because I earned my platinum streaks. People say gray hair, but that shows there's still a level of civility and respect for people of age. One of the things I think in America, and it's different in Africa, they hold dear the elders. The community took care of those, and they brought them back into the household. Other cultures still do that, but what happened to America? Nursing home, rehab centers, they have their purpose. I remember in June 2013, I brought my mom from Louisiana to live with me. And the challenge that I had working full-time and taking care of her, but that was my mother. No matter what differences we might have had, that's the one who gave me birth. And it taught me a lot about what would happen if I had a child. How would I like to be treated in my golden years? How the system is set up. And this might sound off the cuff, but this is my experience. And everything I've said is my experience and from my lens. My mother was not diabetic when she was in the nursing home. She fell ill, and I was ill when I put her in the nurse and rehab, and I put her in the hospital, and they said she had to go to rehab and so forth. They said she needed 24-hour care. Well, I did all I could for 2.5 years. And going to the nursing home was very depressing when a lot of people didn't have people to visit, and how hungry people were for attention. I started going to church there on Sunday that she wasn't able to go to church with me, and I would take her to church. Even when my father was ill in 2002, I brought him to Houston. He was properly diagnosed, stayed with me for about 6.5 weeks. And I took him back home. He lived about 7 years after I brought him back. But that experience helped me to prepare for taking care of my mom. I had power of attorney for both of my parents, and that experience changed how I looked at the world as well. But everything I went through and every challenge that you go through is not for you alone. It's to share. And people who say they're Christians, they call it a testimony. So my testimony is to help someone else. As I said earlier, what you go through in life is not just for you, it's to help someone else along the way.
I like that. Going back to the 80s here, and I know you do go off to University of Michigan for your master's, but the radio station KPVU comes online here in December of 1981. Did you listen to the radio station KPVU while you worked at the library? What do you remember about the station in your first years here working at the university?
Well, the first years here, the signal was strong because I was on campus. Once you left the campus, the power wasn't as strong as it could have been, which means they needed money to expand their reach.
Do you remember any of the programming?
Right now, to be quite honest, no.
That's okay.
I remember Diana, Phyllis? She was on the radio station, and it's Infinite Stage. I want her last name is Staples. I can't think of her last name. I could see her face. If you look in the digital commons, there's a picture with Ed Shannon, who used to work in television in Houston. And before Prairieview actually had a radio station, Dr. George Ruber Woolfolk had radio programs in Houston at KLEE for several years, and we have radio scripts from that as well. And so we had a radio presence, but we didn't have the station in itself. And that's a history that needs to be rediscovered. When we started moving toward the university 150th anniversary, I came up with a phrase that rediscover our history one day at a time. So in order to do that, you need to know what you have on hand, but also what you have on hand shows the gaps that you have. And so the Digital Commons is an online repository. And after research, and this is where technology comes in handy, we discovered the academic building burned down March 1947. So that solidified where's the information. So there's a gap. So rediscovering our history one day at a time will take time. As we approach our 150th anniversary starting next year, we're preparing for that. But how can you recapture what has been lost when you don't know what was lost? But you can look for it, and there's ways of finding it.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. Do you recall a fire in Hilliard Hall in 1986 by any chance? This is the part of the program where I'm going to test you on a few facts. I'm trying to fill in some gaps.
That is not fair. Hilliard Hall was they called it it used to be the dining hall at one point. Mm-hmm. So that's probably where the fire was. I'm not saying for sure, but honestly, I don't know that fact. But thank you for letting me know. Now I'm interested in digging a little deeper about Hilliard Hall.
Yeah, we did a little research looking through the newspaper on campus.
Okay, the Digital Commons.
Yeah.
The Panther, or is it a standard that you use? I hope it was in both newspapers.
I think the Panther.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, Ed Shannon was the first director of the station. Thank you for mentioning his name.
Okay.
And so for you in the library, I guess the interaction with the radio station is as a listener. You're not interacting too often with folks who work at the station. Is it separated in that sense?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I've done a couple of radiothons with Jeff Kelly, who was at the radio station, where we did interviews. Yeah. They might do a sound bite. My name is such and such. I work at such and such at Prairieview A&M University.
Have you done those?
I did 1 or 2 years ago. I haven't done anything recently. One of the things I would say at Prairieview in any community, it's all about developing relationships and how you can cultivate that relationship to help enhance someone else's department.
Say more about that. How would you put that in action?
I would say, what does the radio need from the Special Collections Archives Department? How can we help preserve it? And part of the preservation is using the Digital Commons. What formats do you have as part of this project for the grant? What formats do you have? Is it stored properly? Is it labeled properly? Did you find something across campus that looks like it's in dire strait? Would you check with us before you decide to toss it? What formats are you keeping the old format along with the contemporary format? A rule of thumb is keep the old format. And it's not just the formats, the software, you need to keep the hardware. I remember we have a couple of, I think it's 18 mil filmed football reels, no sound. My dad had one of those film projectors, and I remember how to thread it and use it. I remember how to do a reel-to-reel magnetic tape, put it on the reel-to-reel. So those are treasures. So how can you reformat if you get rid of the hardware? And so it's just like the floppy disk. What is it, 5 1/4, then it's 2 1/2. So if you get rid of that, You get rid of the information and you get rid of the hardware, so you just lost information. You never know what you lost. But the question is, what if you decide to take the time, if you could find the hardware and the format, and what could you do to educate the current generation and the future generation? There's an evolution in everything that we use. And that's one of the things I loved about Africa. If you didn't have it, you could create it. I learned how to make baskets by using papyrus reed. We might call it swamp grass, but I found it here near where I live. The gecko, it's the first time I saw a gecko, was in the house where we lived. And when I came back to the States, it's like, a gecko, where did you come from? I was afraid of them at first, but I found out they don't bother you, but they just eat the bugs. So there were exterminators, so to speak, living exterminators. So there's ways of living, using your past to help you move forward and sustain yourself in the present, and hopefully have a positive impact on the present, which means you'll have a positive impact on the future.
Do you have a favorite artifact or a set of artifacts that you like to use to teach the history of this campus and this university to students?
I have multiple. One photo where a copy of L.W. Minor, which is our first principal of Prairieview. He was born a slave in Louisiana on a slave plantation, which is now, I was in Geismar, Louisiana, Geismar, I believe. His father was the enslaved master. He educated all his children, I believe, in Oberlin College, or at Oberlin College. One of the things I would say about the journey of the administrators at Prairieview and our history is so much to discover. When people say, is this the first, is this the second? I said, I'm very reluctant to say what's the first and is this the last. Because if you don't have all the information, how you know if it's true or not? There was a photocopy of a postcard. A gentleman from Arizona called up, say, would you like these postcards? Sure. 1930-something, there's a picture with a female drum major in her regalia. The band director's name is Will Bennett, and he left Prairieview and went to, I think, Jack Yates High School as a band director. But Will Bennett was here during World War II, and that's when the PV Chords were created because of World War II. The PV Collegians were the all-male band, and they had a female band. Clara Bryant was one of the PV Coeds. She was a trumpetist, and she played with Dizzy Gillespie. She passed on now, but I believe she lived in Los Angeles, California. And Clara Bryant has a CD that we bought. It's called A Girl with a Horn. Beautiful jazz. Clara Bryant is the only Prairieview co-ed in a film called Girls in the Band. And it was interesting. The PV co-ed, I think it was in 2010, 2009, there was an increased interest in the PV co-ed. Sherry Tucker wrote a book about the all-girls band, and I think it's chapter 8, I believe. There's a whole chapter on Prairieview co-eds. There's photographs in there. And that same year, the Smithsonian Institute did a limited edition entitled Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. It's the history of Apollo Theater. And one of those pictures from our collection is in there. That same year, the girls in the band producers wanted to use some footage, some photos. In 2002, under Dr. Charles Hines' presidential administration, he was encouraged by a group of people to have a reunion for the ladies. And so some were able to come back. And Sherry Tucker was the guest speaker for the program. So those ladies made history. So how can you showcase that history? Every era, every opportunity when Prairieview was established has made an impact. And what are my goals? And with the new library administration under Dean Joel Thornton, who started October this year, is to how can we showcase our history, not just for the 150th anniversary, but for years to come. How can we use this as a springboard to garner more collaboration, history department, whatever department on campus, to highlight each department's history? It's an ongoing process, because how can you capture 150 years in 1 year or even 2 years, particularly when there's a gap in that information, not just pre-March 1947. Yearbooks, newspapers, any publication that we produce helps tell the story from our lens, not from the outside. You can write a book about Prairieview and people at Prairieview, but there's a thesis entitled A Promise Unfulfilled by Terrell. I can't think of his first name. I think it's Andrew. It's in the Digital Commons, a good read. There's, if you really think about it, Prairieview was the first public HBCU in the state of Texas. We've been here for 150 years. We garnered embraced the mindset of Booker T. Washington. Vocational education. We eventually incorporated W.E. Du Bois mindset teachers. We became a normal school where you taught people how to be teachers. So one of the things that I love about the history, where I don't have enough time to do a lot of deep dive, is that you never know what you might find. I was doing research. Every time we do research, you find a golden nugget. So how can you open up that treasure trove? There's a jewel in there. It could be a ruby, a diamond, a pearl, and so forth. There was a gentleman that I found through Chronicling America, which was a National Endowment Humanities scan of historical newspapers.
At Library of Congress?
Yeah, Library of Congress. Digital collection. There was a gentleman by the name of Hoffman who worked at Prairieview, moved to Africa, did some work in Africa. They have a strawberry named after him. Go figure.
Your favorite?
Yeah, my favorite fruit. I did some research for something else again, and I went through the catalog. And in the early catalogs, the oldest catalog we have on hand is 1900. In the class of 1890, there's a gentleman by the name of James Sweat. That's a unique name. Heman Sweat. I went to the online handbook of Texas. James Sweat is the father, Heman Sweat. There's some members from the family graduated from Prairieview. He was, they had him listed as a route agent, which means he's a postal worker. How can you connect the dots where who went to Prairieview? Most time when I'm in an environment or in a venue, somebody said, well, my grandmother, great-grandmother finished from Prairieview, blah, blah, blah. You never know. So that makes the job fun and exciting, but you can get you off track because you found something new and exciting. Just
to back up on Heman Sweat, I think you actually told our group last time we were here that he's the one who filed the lawsuit to attend UT, Texas, right? Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. Yeah, and so if I have not been looking for something else and
and this was manual search. I didn't do OCR and the digital comment, because sometimes, depending on the record and how you scan it, OCR may not pick it up because of the quality or the original.
Sure.
And when I looked at it, it's like, are you serious? I was talking to myself, and it's like, let me verify this before I say something. And I got so excited. And that's one of the beauties of working in the archives, and how this institution and other institutions can say that history is long and it's deep, but has a broad reach. Prairieview from 1930, I believe, to 1967, they hosted an annual educational conference for Negro teachers, and it wasn't segregated. Whites attended as well, and we have that information in the Digital Commons.
Thinking about this grand sweep of Prairieview history, I want you to try to place KPVU in that history. Why does this station matter in the history of Prairieview A&M University?
It's the voice of the campus. It's the voice of anyone who is associated with the campus. You might say it's the mouthpiece to let the world know Prairiview's here. By hearing a voice, you can read it, but it's not the same as a voice. It adds a different dimension, a deeper dimension to what you might read. If you have transcription now, you can use the computer to do the transcription, but the voice has power that the words cannot express. KPVU is important to reach those who are not mobile, those who have limited access, say, to the computer, internet. Right now, we still have AM and FM frequency. So what if that goes away? What if the signal cannot be broadcast past a certain number of miles? That's where the internet comes in. So you can use the technology to still broadcast to reach those who need to hear. And you never know what you might learn by changing that dial to KPVU 91.3 FM.
I'm struck by that question of what happens if these stations or these frequencies are no longer available, and it leads me to think about some of the attacks on public radio that are taking place right now from the federal government with the loss of important budget funding. As an archivist, as a Black archivist at an HBCU, how are you thinking about this moment and efforts to erase Black history?
As an archivist and as part of the code of ethics, we're here to document the history. Has nothing to do with politics. It's history. As I mentioned earlier, no one can tell your story better than you can. People can write about it, they can read it, they can research it. I am not you, you're not me. If you want to see how to phrase this. Even though we had challenges in how budget cuts have been made, it also presents an opportunity and a challenge for the people to step up. If you really value anything that you value, you put your money where your mouth is, as the old folks would say. You may not have the money that you think you could, you're like $100 a month or whatever, but every little bit helps. So if you can start with something small, there's better than nothing. It's just like you're voting. Your vote is your voice, so your voice and how you present it is determined by your actions, no matter what you do. It's just like, for instance, I had an option. I probably would have gotten a spanking for it. Well, no, I'm not going to pluck the chicken. Well, I know what would happen if I did say I'm not going to do it to my mother or my father or to an elder. But the benefits of learning how to do something that I might not want to do also teaches you the flexibility and see the importance of what you've been assigned to do. As the world continues to change, for me, no matter how old you are or how young you are, you can learn from anyone. Because I have students here, I never consider myself, I know it all. I always tell the students, I will admit when I'm wrong because I'm human. If you don't show that side of you that you're human, people will look at you different. And if you're willing to humble yourself and be vulnerable and say, I'm sorry, I apologize, that shows your humanity. No one is perfect. And so that being said, I believe in, while you're here at Prairieview A&M or any other institution, of course you have your standards. I'm not saying discount or disregard your standards. But how, again, treat people how you want to be treated. No matter what your label is, I'm doctor, I have my master's, whatever you might have, you didn't do it by yourself. There's no way you could be a man or woman on an island and get across to the next island. How could you do that? Somebody might help you at some point in time. I've had some students that I've met through their assignment, and they just needed a listening ear. Nobody listened. I said, have a seat. What's going on? That's not in my job description, but that's in my inner being as a human being and how I was taught. I saw what my parents did with students at Grambling, and that's important to keep that mindset going. I would never stop caring for people. Never, because that's in my DNA.
I was going to say that feels like a deeply HBCU approach to education.
I would say yes. I would say it is. And I always ask myself, am I being purposeful today? And I never know when opportunity presents itself. Like when you approach me today, it's like, what? Okay, sure. Seize the day. Seize the opportunity to do an impromptu interview. Because I don't know how this is going to be viewed or listened to. Some people will agree, some might not. But again, this is my viewpoint as a human being who happens to work at an HBCU in Prairieview, Texas.
Yeah, and speaking of working at an HBCU, can you speak a little bit to some of the challenges that you face or people who are working at HBCUs may face in garnering resources, in whatever it may be? What have you experienced in trying to realize the programming that you want to realize here on campus at Prairieview?
That is not a fair question. Let me see how to phrase this.
Or just how do you navigate those challenges when they do arise?
I've learned sometimes your idea may not be received. I'm analytical first, but I'm also creative, and I try to marry the two. Let me give you an example. When I did the first application for a summer intern in 23, the goal was, how can we start doing historical research for the upcoming 150th anniversary? So I framed the job description around that, hired a person by the name of Trinity Morris, history major who just graduated in May of this year. If she hears this recording, which I will share with her, she was very resistant in doing the interview. what I just told you, record it, and I gave a couple of things to include, and the rest I left to her. I told her it's not every student I had another student with Getty's Images in summer intern 22, but I felt like we need to get started at least 2 years out on something because people would be coming to the archives. And that video that she did, I have used so many times, and it opened doors for her to do several presentations before she graduated. And every student who has the time or someone comes in my office and we talk about questions such as this, do you have a moment? I want you to watch this video. Everything that she spoke about touches on Dr. LeGrand's strategic plan entitled Journey to Eminence 2025 to 2035. We're here because the students. So I tapped into that personal potential that I know that is in every student that I hire. And I told them up front, I'm going to make you work. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to stretch you, but it's for your betterment. I might not know everything, but I know a few things. So if you're willing to work and be honest and be trustworthy and accountable, this is the place for you. If not, this is not the place for you. And everybody who I have shared and talked, we might not agree. You might have left mad. You might have decided to quit because of me. You might have said some things unfavorable to me. But I never intend, it's not in my makeup to hurt anybody, but it's to bring out what I see in you. Every time you take time to nurture a person, particularly when you know there's something deeper inside, Maya Angelou has a saying, people never forget how you made them feel. I can't remember the other part of the quote. But they might not never talk to me again, and I always use every day as a teaching moment because I might drop dead today. And that student or the person who came to my office or met me somewhere on campus anywhere, I might not ever see them. So never miss an opportunity as a teaching moment. I was in Kroger's in Cypress. I had a Gold Panther shirt on. Young lady behind the cash register was a PB grad. It's like, really? We started having a conversation. The lady who was behind me, she started smiling. So we started talking about Prairieview, but we still were doing the work. And she was smiling. That was one of the things that I enjoyed doing. You never know who you might meet. And when I was in Kampala, Uganda, when I was flying back to the States, I wanted to bring this up. My mother introduced me at New Rocky Valley Baptist Church. I went to church 1 year when I came back to visit. The gentleman was from Kampala, Uganda, who was head of the English department at Grambling State University. I was on the plane at Entebbe Airport in Uganda, waiting for us to take off. They kept calling this gentleman's name. I can't remember his name. It's like the name sounds familiar. And so when we got to Heathrow Airport, which I was connecting flight, he was at the bus stop for this hotel. I looked at him and it's like, I know this man from somewhere. And it clicked. My mother introduced me to him at church, at New Rocky Valley Baptist Church in Grambling. I met him in Africa.
Wow.
Not knowing that he came to Kabali for a funeral. What's the likelihood 10,000 miles away, where little old Grambling, Louisiana, at a little church in Grambling, I would see him at Heathrow Airport. What's the likelihood?
Small world.
Yeah, and his daughter graduated from Grambling. She was Miss Grambling.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, just the diaspora is amazing. Thinking about what heaven forbid, you see, like, what happens if I were to drop dead, and heaven forbid, no, but what does happen when you are no longer the custodian of the history of this university? Like, how do you think about your legacy at this institution in terms of continuing to preserve the history and making sure people care about it?
You shot me with two barrels on that one. One is to do what I've already said, is to pour into people, to show the importance of history, to honor the code of ethics, to share with someone one-on-one, because you will be at a table or an event that I won't be at. So how can I share with you those golden nuggets that I just mentioned? How can those who would listen to this podcast or this interview, it might be something that I say that triggers a memory. It's like, I remember so-and-so told me about this, and I need to do a better job by donating to the archives or to the radio station. How can I use my collection that could add to the cultural experience at Prairieview or another HBCU? How can you really have a foundation if you don't know your history? History repeats itself. The names might change, the time is different, but the information and how you write it also determines what is really truly history. You can interpret it. I mentioned the voice has an impact compared to a sheet of paper on words or what you read on the computer. Keep your hard copy. Keep your your software. What I would share with the dean, Joel Thornton, is since he's been here, I said I have some good news to share. And the good news can feed the spirit. If you feed the spirit, that means you have something that's alive. And if you decide to discontinue feeding the spirit, that's on you, but I've done my part. I would love to have an audience with Dr. LeGrand. Say, Dr. LeGrand, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And how you could use the radio station paired with the archives and other departments on this campus to rally the masses. When I say the masses, is anybody who has a listening ear. The importance of this HBCU and other HBCUs, like Ruth Simmons and what she's doing with Harvard, with HBCUs. If you look at the building of this country, how can you say that African Americans are not part of this history? Who helped build the White House? Who built the mansion? Who cultivated the crops? Who fed your children, nursed your children? Again, everybody has two eyes, a nose, a mouth. You're a human being. You walk on two feet. We're not four-legged creatures. We're higher than those who have 4 legs. We have choices. Animals go by instinct. So I'm saying that we have a higher sense of what can be done. It's just like, for instance, if you see a dead animal on the side of the road, who killed it? I mean, that may be a harsh comparison, but who did it? The animal doesn't know that when they cross the road, that vehicle will kill them or maim them. Now, we have a building. So I wouldn't want to see a spider inside. I assume a spider should be outside. But we're taking up their space. So how do we respect that space? So saying that, there's an ecosystem in every situation. How do you feed that ecosystem to be sustainable? You might give $1. You might donate something in kind, some newspapers. You might have a recording, photographs, whatever. And it's not just Prairieview history, but about your family history. Because it starts with the core of your family. So how can you know about your family? What shaped you, whether you know them or not, or never got a chance to meet them? Both my grandfathers died when I was a baby. I have no remembrance of them. I met my grandmothers. Each one was totally different. My mother's side of the family, my Grandma Ruby, she might have been 4'9", wet. If you saw her from a distance, she looked white, but she was black. Her mother was a husky woman, like fair skin with blue eyes, but she was black. But her husband, both my grandfather and great-grandfather were blue-black. So the generation, they paired each other, but still at that time, and even in some places now, the interracial marriages and dating is still frowned upon. But you're still a human being. Everybody wants love. Everybody wants someone to care for them. And how we treat people also reflects how we think about ourselves.
I like that idea you had a moment ago of collaborating with the radio station to present the history of the campus.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to create the first story to air history moments in Prairieview A&M, what would that be? What's the most important historical message to communicate out?
Another loaded question. The first episode, I'm going to title it Rediscover Our History One Day at a Time. This is our first broadcast to educate and illuminate the impact of Prairieview A&M University, from whence we came, a former slave plantation on the Kirby slave plantation, Alta Vista plantation, where we had an opportunity years later to meet the great-granddaughter by the name of Becky Vanderslice, who was a descendant of the second marriage of Kirby, who decided to make a phone call one day in 2021 to the Special Collections Archives Department, 936-261-1516, and I picked up the phone. I knew she was hesitant by the way she posed her words, her hesitation. And when she was talking, she mentioned to me how she felt uncomfortable. These are not exact words, I'm just paraphrasing. And how she'd been wanting to do this for years. She came on campus, and if you could listen to the broadcast, I See You by Eddie Robinson, who's now at Prairieview, I See You program. It was, interview was done by, I think, Melanie Price. Dr. Marco Robinson was on it, and Becky and her two daughters were on the broadcast, interview. When Becky said her church members encouraged her to call Prairieview, that was my segue in to pray for her. I actually prayed for her. I thought about her if that was my mother or my grandmother, which means I thought of her as a human being. That's somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, is somebody's sister, aunt, church member. You treat people with the love that you would want someone to give you and to give your mother or your sister or a female, or even if it was a man. It's important to remember you never know what type of impact. And when Becky and her two daughters and her sister came to Prairieview, everybody embraced each other. It took about a year for that to happen. We had a program, it's on the internet, it's on the university's website. But what if I had a different viewpoint because she's from the enslaved? Would it be fair to her because she can't pay for the crimes of the past? So how can you expect someone to pay for the crimes of the past they had nothing to do with? No one was asked to be born. And for me, if I haven't done anything right at Prairieview, I would say that was one of the moments I actually had been praying for years. I wish someone from the Kirby family would call, and it happened, not knowing it would actually happen. And I know people say, oh, she's talking about religion. This is my viewpoint as a person, as a human being. That's what I've chose and how I would present myself. I'm not perfect by a long shot, but I have no regrets on what I did with Miss Becky Vanderslice, because it also opens the door of conversation where I did a presentation with Dr. Marco Robinson, one of his students, and Dr. Ronald Goodwin, who's over the Division of Social Sciences. I did a presentation with them, and my segment was about, meeting Becky and her family. And a lady came up to me who I never met. She said, thank you for what you said about treating people like human beings, even though you're doing oral interviews. We do our training, human subject, all that's part of protocol to protect privacy and respect for people on both sides of the mic. But again, she's a human being. And that's our first episode, just to let you know that you never know what will happen. And as I close most of my emails, I look forward to the possibilities.
Well, I'm going to listen. I love it. You've been very generous with your time, so I'm just going to ask one last question here is, as the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, why do you think it's important that we're documenting the history of HBCU radio and, by extension, the history of HBCUs and archives and trying to make these connections?
It's important because it's a voice, as I mentioned earlier. If we don't do it, who will? It's important for us to tell our story from our lens, and it's important to let those who've come before us and those who are here now and those who will come after us, that somebody did what they could with what they had. And I always say, reach for the stars, maybe you land on the moon. Sometimes timing is always important, like with Becky. What's the likelihood I would have known Becky and her name would have been Becky? If you plant the seeds, again, they might hit rock, they might hit fertile soil, but sometimes it's the water that you need to nurture it. And what are the things that I went to a community-based oral history summit at the University of California, Irvine. I'm going to give a shout out to Audra, Julia, and God, she's going to kill me. Her last name is Tribbett. Can't think of her first name.
Yeah. What did you learn there?
It was a summit where community-based archives got a chance to share their stories and what they're about, make a connection. It was a sub-award that we received. But it was one of the only ones that I could think of conferences that I've been to, or professional workshops, whatever you want to call it. But there was a synergy when you got there and how open people were. People were given the opportunity to be free. The freedom there was no recording. We taught at the beginning there's respect in this place, and people honor that. And you met people from all walks of life, but everyone there had a passion to record the oral history of the people for their community. And so part of that is also having connection with the community, not just what's on campus. The community is anybody who can hear you, I would say. You can be 1,000 miles away, but the community gets closer when you have the voice that is broadcast either on the internet or through the radio waves.
So, obviously I can't get to everything in your life, and we've jumped around. We've talked about quite a bit in the last couple hours. But if there's anything that we've left out that you would really love to get on the record before we close, go right ahead.
Oh, that's 3-barrel question. I would like to give a thank you for those who created this grant, this program. First of all, they know the importance, and the funders know the importance of it. I'm hoping that this will continue to be a springboard to something bigger and better, and also use it as a platform in the classroom for communication majors, history majors. You cover every aspect. You could say computers. Someone might develop an app for it. What if you have an app if you got rid of the frequencies? What if somebody created an app, computer science major? Or someone has a love for coding. What if you had an opportunity to discover a treasure trove of magnetic tapes or beta tapes or VHS tape, DAC, whatever format, audio or audiovisual? What could you do with that information? It only takes a moment to make a change, and the change is determined by what you decide to do at that moment. It might take a little extra time, but if you don't do it, who will?
That's very well said. And Phyllis Earles, I appreciate you making the time for me today to have this conversation.
Well, thank you, Will. I really appreciate it. I feel it is an honor. I'm very humbled by the invitation, and thank you. And those who listen, I hope you gather some nuggets from it. And I'm honored by being part of this grant and this collaborative effort. And I look forward to the possibilities.
Thank you.